Conflict and presentation skills today. So, continuing on, there's so many different aspects of communication as a leader. And so, here we are continuing to work through some of these important topics. So, we have a great agenda. It's attached to your Outlook invitation. I've also put it in Blackboard. Slight title change to our first session, but it's the same content and speaker. So I'll just talk through what our plan is for our time together. The first presentation, we're going to be digging into a classic EDUCAUSE article that one of our former mentors, Melissa Wu, brought to our attention a few years back. And so we have the amazing Denise Burby. You want to give everybody a wave, Denise? Thank you for being with us. So many of you in this IT higher ed space know Denise, and for those of you who don't, you get an opportunity to meet her today and just have another resource and amazing CIO in your network. So Denise will be talking us through and teaching us some of the important takeaways from that article. And the title for her presentation is Geeks and Non-Geeks Bridging the Divide. So our first sort of hour will be delving into that topic. We'll take a break at 2 o'clock, so you can plan for that. You can step away for 15 minutes. And then when we come back together, we will have two of our other former CIO mentors from this program, Dr. Jacqueline Bailey, who is she was at Buffalo State when she was with us in the program, and now she is the Vice Chancellor of Information Technology and CIO for the System Office at Minnesota State University. And we also have the There's No One Like Him, Sean Moriarty from SUNY Oswego. And so he has supported this program in so many ways. And so you'll get a chance to hear from him and Jackie talking about getting the jitters out for your presentation that's coming up on May 8th. So really timely and hopefully helpful for those of you who are sort of dreading the getting in front of a group. But you know each other, you all are rooting for each other. So really, this is a safe environment to be practicing these skills if it's something that you're uncomfortable with. So those are our two formal learning topics. The presentation skills will take us through about 3 o'clock. And then we'll have about 20 minutes or so for large group discussion. So on the agenda, we've got a couple of topics there, but really if there's something that's on your mind that you want to bring to the group, this is your time, and we'll just facilitate a conversation all together. And then you'll have time at the end of today to work with your mentor in your small group and just sort of put the finishing touches on where you are with your applied learning project, get some feedback from your colleagues, and just help each other out and see what is most useful in terms of using your time with your mentor and your colleagues. So I know we said until 5 o'clock, but really we should probably wrap up a little bit before 5. We will come back together after 4:30 and see if there's any questions. But if you have questions now based on what we have planned for today or what I'm here to answer. And we've got Christy on as well. You can always send us direct messages through Zoom, but we're happy to help. Is there anything that you want to bring forward now? No? Oh, is there something in the chat? Let's see here. Oh, Lewis. Hi, Lewis. All right, so we are recording this session. We will continue to put all of our growth sessions that we're doing on Zoom on our private playlist for the group. So they're there, and they're also linked right in the Blackboard, the Brightspace environment. So all of the resources for anything that we've covered so far from February through today is all in there. Resources for your applied learning project. One small thing before I pass it over to Denise is something that I added to Brightspace earlier this week, and that's accessibility guidelines, some resources there. you're going to be sharing your presentation file with us so that we can put it on the CPD website at the end, and this will live beyond your experience with us. And for future cohorts, they'll have your topic and what you've worked on for your project. So feel free to redact any information that you need to. But we want to make sure that the information that we're posting on the website is accessible. We're also working with SUNY Systems library office, so we can have this go in the SUNY digital repository. So that's why we're making an extra effort to make sure files that have already been posted and the ones coming from you are fully accessible. So there are some resources in there. There's a getting started video that's like 12 minutes. And there's also the checklist from the DayQ University. I know if you have gone into DayQ, there's so many resources in there. It's a bit overwhelming, but I put in a checklist and it links to things. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need help with that. All right, so I went on a little bit longer than I had planned. So thank you for bearing with me. But I'm delighted to have Denise with us here today, and she has a slide deck that she's going to share with you. And welcome, Denise. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. So I am going to make sure this is sharing correctly. And it's a captioning. It's not captioning for you, correct?
It says subtitles. Oh, no, it went away.
It's only because I'm talking and so you are seeing my full screen, right? Because I've got the presenter stuff. So
Oh, now we are seeing the captioning.
I thought that only came on for everybody, but I'm going to leave that on. That's distracting. Let me know. So thank you. Thank you for having me here. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm currently work for SUNY iTech, which is the Information Technology Exchange Center. So I have a few colleagues on this call with me that are in part of the program today, which is great. And I'm contracted out to Corning Community College as their Chief Information Officer for 50% of my time. Prior to that, I was with Jamestown Community College for about 24 years, 13 of which I was the Chief Information Officer. Prior to that, I worked with faculty as the Distance Learning Director and also in workforce. So I've grown into IT. That's not where I actually started. So when we talk about geeks and non-geeks and bridging the divide, I had to bridge that divide. I was the non-geek and I have learned to be a geek and stuff. So my role, I was specifically hired as a CIO at Jamestown because I was a non-geek. And my role was to bridge the gap between the IT department and the faculty and the administration so that the college could actually progress and implement more technology that the faculty wanted and needed, but they were having a hard time talking with the IT folks and vice versa. So does this resonate with any of you? And unfortunately, this is often the case. Today, we're going to specifically delve into communications between geeks and non-geeks, where that divide is, what can cause it, and how we can bridge that divide. And then identify things that you can do going forward to help make sure that your communication is really happening. So I want to start out with defining the terms. So geeks and non-geeks. First of all, it's shorthand. They're really not derogatory labels. This really is just the emphasis, their emphasis is and perspective are different. It's not about intelligence or value. It's really just different perspectives. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. Unfortunately, when it comes to geeks and non-geeks, communication always doesn't go so well. I'm guessing you all can probably think of a time or two where you've experienced this, or perhaps you're thinking about an upcoming meeting or a call that you're dreading. Frankly, we've all been there at one time or another. This happens pretty regularly in my work as a CIO when I'm on a campus and stuff. But I'll give you an example of a previous institution where I was at. So there was a construction project, and maybe typical of, I'm hoping this isn't typical, but I'm finding a lot of times this is typical. IT isn't at the initial meetings when a construction project may start. So I got invited pretty well through when the plans were all set and there were blueprints to see and they were now discussing budgets and so forth. So as I got to the meeting and they're rolling out the plans and I had my network administrator was with me and they're talking about like timeline and when when people are coming and the bids are done and we've got people back and we're going to do all of this stuff and they're like ready to start this project. And the network administrator and I are looking at the plans and we look up and I said, do you realize that you are building this expansion of this building right over the manhole where all of our IT comes into our data center? It's the pipe where everything comes in. It's also the pipe where all the electrical comes in for the building. And they all like sat there. I said, it was probably it was a lot, several tens of thousands of dollars to move all of that underlying cable infrastructure in order for them to continue on with the project. When we had that conversation, that we walk out of that meeting and they said, this is why we never invite IT, because you always have something that's going to go wrong in the project and stuff. And we're kind of like stepping back going, and if you had invited us at the beginning, we probably wouldn't be facing this problem right now. But it's a reason why a lot of times people think IT are roadblocks, because people are moving along in a project, everything's swimming along, and we sometimes have to bring up things that, there is a little bit of glitch in what this plan is. So how we bring those kinds of things up is really what is the focus of, how do we improve the communication so that we do get invited to the table at the beginning and we don't run into this problem. I mean, the fact is, we don't want people avoiding each other at the time that they need to be collaborating the most. So geeks and non-geeks, from contraxioms to collaboration in higher education, is the article that Carolyn referenced. Why is it so hard for us to communicate at this time? The article was written about a decade ago, but it's still relevant for a lot of the challenges that we face in IT leadership. In the article, Glenn and McManus discuss the cultural communication gap between the IT professionals and the rest of the college. It is written for higher education, but I do know that there are people who are not in higher ed, and I think it's still very valid, and a lot of these examples and things that we're going to talk about will apply for those of you that aren't in higher ed as well. The underlying theme of the article is that geeks and non-geeks really see the world differently. We look at things through a different lens. It's not a right and a wrong here. It's just different. Recognizing some of those differences can help us rethink how we as geeks talk and communicate to the non-geeks or the non-technical people. So let's talk about some of the things that cause the divide. First of all, language. We all do this. Most of us use jargon from their business in everyday life. It's what we're comfortable with. It's the shorthand we use with our team in conversations. Unfortunately, it's just not always effective when we're trying to communicate to those outside of our immediate world. Let me give you an example. If you're talking to the HR department about some new software package that they want to roll out, and the administrator is asking, how long is it going to take to implement this software? We want to get this up and running. We're ready to go. Give me a date. When is this going to happen? A lot of times our first response in IT is going to be something like, well, let's see. First, we need to integrate the API with the SSO so we can leverage MFA. At this point, the eyes glaze over from the administrators, and they're just kind of like, okay, you lost us in one sentence with 3 different acronyms that we know nothing about, nor do we care and stuff. All I want is a date. So, we have these conversations, almost weekly here at Corning as somebody comes up with a project and stuff. And it's so easy for us as technical people to process out loud sometimes about what are the things that we're talking about. And if you have a colleague with you that's technical and you're going, well, we need to do this, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. And the jargon and that language, those terms can just overwhelm people who one, they don't really need to know. They need to know what the effect or how long that's going to take you to overcome whatever you're talking about. But, you know, it's one thing that you just need to watch. If you get too far into the jargon or you're using too many acronyms, you really are just causing confusion. And it really can cause you to alienate the people that you're talking with, or have them just point blank go, I'm not going to invite you to the meeting because I can't understand what you're talking about. So, I mean, I'm actually going to share another story about this, because this is an iTech story, and Fian will know this really well because he was part of the conversation when I did this. I told you I was not a technical person to start out with. So it can get very technical working in a tech company where everybody is way smarter about all the technology than I am. And at one point, we were working with the campus to do some implementation stuff. The conversation just kept going so technical that I could not understand any of the acronyms. And I finally sent an email and said, in English, please, answer yes or no to these questions. And then somebody draw me a picture, because I couldn't understand or follow all of the details of the networking and the connections and the servers. I couldn't follow any of that. So, you know, from me at that point was the non-geek in the room going, you're losing me. I'm trying to have to make a decision about a budget and what we need to do, and I don't understand a word anybody is saying and stuff. And that can get really frustrating. And when you're on a time crunch as an administrator, as a non-geek, when I had to actually sign, like, this is going to be thousands and thousands of dollars and what we're going to have to sign for a 5-year contract, and I don't know what I'm talking about. And you're not helping me understand if I'm making the right decision or not. So, I mean, fortunately, we have a great relationship among our colleagues at iTech that I can have that conversation and say, you got to stop because I can't understand what you're saying, and break it down for me in, you know, in English and more simplistic for me. So keep that in mind as you're using language and jargon when you're having to meet with other administrators and other groups or other departments that are non-technical. Another characteristic of things that can really divide the geeks and the non-geeks is that they focus on different things. There's a new project being implemented. As IT, we're focusing on what's that underlying technology that we need to build and focus on, where administrators are focused on what's the impact of this software that's going to go in. So, for example, like a learning management system, you know, when we're putting in a learning management system, we might be thinking about, okay, you know, we've got the implementation. We need to somehow connect it to our authentication system and do single sign-on. How are we loading all of the people? You know, is that going back to our ERP system? And how are we connecting that? Are we connecting that through APIs? Or, you know, how's that all going to happen? Who's uploading all the content? Blah, 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 blah. All the technical parts, of which the administrators just want it to happen. They don't really care about SSO, the APIs, or anything else that we have to do to make that happen. They really just want to know, like, when can we get started? How is this going to affect, you know, the training programs that we're putting out to our people in our organization or our students? You know, what are the benefits for the end user from, you know, going to have the system in place? So you got to keep that in mind. You know, IT looks at that in a very different way than what the non-technical people look at. And does this sound familiar to people? IT is seen as a roadblock. Cost centers, the people who say no. Over the course of my career, I've had people point blank said this to me, like, you just always say no, or you are the, you know, your team is the roadblock. And, you know, and that was one of the things, like, when I came into my first CIO job, that was totally why I was hired, was because we can't work with IT. We don't understand what they're saying. And, you know, bridging that gap of saying, like, look, you know, when you talk with the IT people, they were going, they just don't get it. Like, they don't understand it. They don't want to change. We have this really cool things we could do. We can streamline processes. And in the end, they both wanted the same thing, but because they were approaching it from different perspectives, like, no one could ever see the fact that you guys are really wanting the same, ultimately wanting the same thing, but you're talking about it differently. And because of that, you really aren't communicating at all, and the projects are going nowhere because you can't see the commonality that you're all trying to do the same thing. The last thing that I really want to talk about as far as things that kind of characteristic the divide between the geeks and the non-geeks are siloed operations. And this, like the example I gave at the beginning with a construction project, you know, a lot of times and for some reason, construction projects always seem to be my challenge here, is they never think they need to bring IT at the beginning of the conversation. I know we get pulled in when the plans are already developed, and I've had many construction projects where I look at blueprints and go, you have no network data anywhere on the plan. Like, are you not going to put a phone in here, an emergency phone or a Wi-Fi access point, or connect a computer anywhere in the building? And they go, oh gosh, we forgot about that and stuff. You know, you think in this day and age that's pretty obvious, but it has happened to me at least 3 times on major construction projects. So, you know, this siloed operation is another thing that we really need to work at breaking down and making sure that we are getting invited to the table. And the way we communicate with people and how we can improve our communication is going to be one of the ways that we address that. So kind of outlined 4 of the kind of areas that the article addresses in the things that can divide geeks and non-geeks. But I'd really like to take some time right now and hear some feedback from all of you. So where in organizations, you know, in your organization, where do you see some of this divide right now? Think about specific interactions, project meetings, budget discussions. I'm going to stop talking. Go ahead, Joan.
Hi, Denise. It's it's nice to meet you. I'm at the Rochester Institute of Technology. We definitely see it, and we see it a lot in facilities, so I can validate what you're saying. I actually have a question, which is, I think sometimes the over-reliance on jargon and technical communication is lack of awareness, and I'm speaking on the part of IT. I think sometimes it might not be a lack of awareness, but either not being incentivized to communicate clear, like I'm too busy, or I want to show my expertise. And I wondered if you have strategies to change that.
That is a challenge. It actually, at some points in time, people are like, I look smarter if I have a lot of the technology. And I've had team members who've been like that, to go, if I can spew out all of this technical stuff. Some of it sometimes is like, if I do this, they're not going to ask me a question that I might not be able to answer. And so a lot of that is actually creating a safe environment for people to be able to say, I don't know, I need to get back to you on that. Like, it's not something we know. How I've addressed that is mostly I try to model that a lot with my team, to be able to say, you know, it's okay to say you don't know. When I'm in team meetings, I will say, it's not something I know. I need to go research that, or I need to get back to you. And I think once people get used to the fact that it's okay and nobody's going to yell at them for saying, I don't know, that, you know, and you reinforce it's okay to say you don't know. I'd rather you say, I don't know this, you know, no is an okay answer, like you don't know, than to fake it. And I think you understand what you're talking about, because me as a when I'm in a tech team, I'm usually the non-technical person in a tech team, even though I know I have technical background, but I'm probably the lowest person as far as technical, like, understanding of my IT team, because that's what they do on a day-to-day basis. I'm not a networker, I'm not a programmer, and so forth. So, you know, sometimes making that environment safe for them is a really important thing, and it can help them do it. But it's not going to be something that happens overnight. You just have to make sure that's what your culture is.
Yeah.
So that might be a suggestion.
Thank you.
Michael.
Hey, Denise, this is to you again. Yeah, you hit your whole presentation. I've sat here and I'm listening, and I'm like, you hit the nail on the head so many times that it's hard to even judge it, because everything you said I face on a daily basis, whether it be faculty members who try to go around the policies to get new hardware or to get turned down, or renovations on buildings that get the wrong people involved. Because the one thing I'm gonna add to this is that when you have projects that are really big, like you had mentioned, the renovations on the building, or construction sites, everybody's bringing to that table just what they know, what they want. And they not necessarily, don't want someone to be there that's gonna shut down their ideas of what they want. And B, they don't think, oh, I didn't know IT needed to be involved. We're just building a building. Or a small, like one project that we're working on is we're relocating, we're actually doing demolition on our number one telecommunications room, where all of our fiber and all of our circuits are, and they're basically destroying the building, so you got to redirect and relocate everything. And I wasn't invited to that meeting, very first meeting. So in fact, I didn't know about it until the third meeting. Now, they did have IT people in the first meeting, but it wasn't his area of expertise. So when I got upset, I asked to be invited. I basically asked for all the information, the blueprints, and I noticed that the building was going underground. And I said, well, what about flooding? This is anyway.
Yeah, a lot of things that people don't ever think about.
They don't think
and
about
stuff.
things, and location. And there's a lot of, I basically put them on a whole different path where I wanted to make it more useful building than what we currently use it for. But again, they bring what they know, what they want to that table, and it's really important to have all areas have a value or a say in it.
And so getting us at the table is really important. So it takes a lot of work to get them to look at IT as the trusted partner, to say, yeah, we want you here because, well, part of it is they don't want to feel stupid. So being able to talk to them, so they go like, yeah, okay, you're not going to make me feel like I don't know what we're talking about when we get them into meetings. But Tyler, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say at my organization, I see a lot of folks in the between the technical and non-technical. And sometimes I find that those folks are really in a unique position to bridge the gap, because they know a lot of the technical side of things, but they also know how to kind of present themselves and speak to non-technical folks that might have trouble understanding the tech speak. And so I found that interesting, trying to fit that into the mix of the things you're talking about.
Those are great people to keep around and to bounce things off of. The people that can do that translator. I see a lot of people are using the word translator, and I think when I get asked, like, what do I do as a CIO, I usually say, that's my first thing I say. I'm a translator. I'm the translator between administration and the IT folks and stuff in a lot of ways. And then I think that's teaching these communication skills to your tech folks are important. And I think it lessens the frustration on them when they start understanding what administrators are looking for as well. And there's a lot of educating up as well too. Administrators have to understand that there's technology that runs this, and that it's not, I can flip a switch tomorrow and everything you want is going to happen. That there's security concerns, and there's other, there's things that they really do need to pay attention to too. So, as your role as a CIO, you kind of have to educate both up and down, and do that translation as well. Other thoughts about, where you see some of the divide in your organizations, or things you'd like maybe want to share? And you can feel free to put them in the chat too, as people are doing. Anything else?
Oh, well, so, hey, Denise, how are you? Good afternoon, everyone. So as far as the divide, I think I'm seeing more of everyone wants to do IT, right? The cloud systems have made it so nice and I can just buy it with a credit card. And before you know it, you're responsible for it. So Denise and I have planned this. We've talked about this actually a couple of days ago. And, you know, they don't want to loop us in. So you don't loop us in, but yet you want it to perform, but you want all the benefits without the accountability to whether it be SUNY, the feds, you name it, whatever entity there is. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, you mentioned it, Denise, the Office of No, right? But it should be, as a CIO, at least the way I've approached it, is it's no, but no, not right now, because, and when we get here, then we can. And by the way, did you know we have another effort that's going on and you're duplicating an effort? And that's the last thing your presidents want to hear as a senior leader. So just figured I'd throw that out there.
Very, very good point. And I've been in small institutions and stuff, so it's, to be honest, a lot easier for me at a small institution. We have about like under 2,000 FTEs, and both Jamestown and Corning are roughly the same time, you know, same type of size. I think max we were like at 4,000, but you know, it took a while for us to get, you know, say like all IT purchases need to get reviewed by us. Like, so you get the business office of purchasing department to say, can you let us know when somebody's buying software? But if your departments have purchasing cards and they can purchase up to, you know, our purchasing card limit here is $2,000. We have people who buy software and then call you and say, hey, let's implement this. And then you're sitting here going, well, okay, first of all, you know, it's not accessible, and, you know, going down through the lines. But I think Garrett's idea and approach is sometimes good. Let's sit down and take a look at this. What are you trying to do? You know, is that stuff, do we have things that are already doing that here on campus? Because that's happened a lot. Like we have two people buying two different things, and we have the technology already to do some of that stuff. And instead of first coming out of the thing saying, no, you can't have that, is going like, what are you trying to do? And maybe we can help you, and maybe we can save you money, and maybe, you know, to have those kind of conversations. Michael.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, Garrett, that was a good one too, because those are actually words that I was grilled during the application process at Old Westbury, where the IT staff were basically trying to get me to would I say no to the faculty, would I say no to the staff, because they needed a shield. But those words are exactly what I said. It's not now. It's not right now. We're not saying no. We're saying it's possible. And we have the same dilemma with software, with the cloud, that people go out and they just buy their software. So I've sat with the faculty senate and everybody, you know, the VP level, and saying, listen, if Old Westbury or the university owns it, it goes through IT. And we'll make sure it's secure and it's safe and it meets the goals, and we don't have duplication like Eric said, because that's very common when it's outside of the control of IT. So
Garrett, go ahead. Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, no, and this is a conversation that's happening in every institution, but you know, if there were a Title IV issue, right, we all know where that sits, and that area should handle it, right? And you may need, you know, help from other areas, you know, corralling certain information, et cetera, but to your point, Michael, and for everyone just within the earshot, IT should handle IT things. The biggest thing that you're all going to face a challenge with is AI. And, you know, where does that live? You know, it's out there, right? Is it controlled by IT? And does that brain or that bot get trained by the different areas? Like, how does that work? I'm going to say this, we're probably in the most exciting time of IT, because now I think with the cloud scenario out there and just AI and many other things, they're starting to see what we do, right? They're kind of getting closer to the sausage factory, but they're not making the sausage like we do, right, for them. So just wanted to point that out.
I just wanted to add to that, Garrett, and this is the words, like, again face is that we speak the same language. You know, the geeks versus the non-geeks, with this what you were talking about, is what I try to get my staff to do is get involved in every application, even if it predates me, for that support, because my argument with my staff or my conversation goes, but we speak the same language. So us getting the support for the end user is a lot easier, because when the end user calls, they don't speak their language. We know the questions to ask, we know the areas to question, and we know what they're saying. So we're a better liaison than the end user. So that always comes into play very often now.
Absolutely. So part of the article talks about, they coined the new term, and their term, they call it is contraxioms. So an axiom is really like a statement that we believe to be true, but doesn't necessarily have proof to it. But it's kind of our fundamental assumptions. And geeks and non-geeks are very different when it comes to that. Now, everybody's going to be, this is a continuum, so everybody's kind of like not like one way or the other. They're obviously on that spectrum of where, like how technical you look or versus how visionary you look and stuff. But, just for the sake of what we're talking about today, like that is a very different viewpoint when you're talking between technical people and administrators. So, those worldviews are just different. They're not right or wrong. They're just different. And one of the things that you got to remember is like when you're, you come through and you go to school for IT, and then you work in IT, and the people you surround yourself a lot of times are all like you. So it's very easy for IT staff and conversely administrators who all are in their world with their friends and their people that they work with, who are all viewing the world from their perspective, that you end up with these two very, very different worldviews and on how to approach problems and stuff. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I think one of the things, as Joan, as you mentioned about like, how do you get your staff to kind of start bridging those gaps is getting them out to see people and different things from different perspectives and stuff, and connecting them, not necessarily in a huge group, but maybe you invite somebody to your team for lunch that you start chatting with faculty. We've done that with our team, where they've started to understand when faculty are sitting with you over lunch to say, oh yeah, this has been a frustration in the classroom for me. I wish the technology did XYZ. And then they start seeing it from a different perspective of how something's implemented versus just the technical side of how do we plug everything in to make it work. So if you think about it, geeks are all about solving problems, and everything's a problem, or here's the solution to solve that problem, where the non-geeks tend to work more into here's the vision that we're trying to achieve. And the vision is not a problem, it's the experience and stuff. So that's kind of the divide that we see. How that sometimes manifests is from the geek side, we can think, and I'm not going to say I've never thought this. We can think that the administrators or the faculty are like, you are just too scattered. Like your ideas are just not based in reality for us to be able to implement from a technology side and stuff. And on the other side of it, as administrator going, I'm showing you the big picture, you're not getting it. You're too down in the weeds to be understanding what we're trying to accomplish. Another thing to think about is that a lot of times geeks are very objective. It's the details, it's the analysis. They're looking at, how is this going to get done? What does the data say, as we're looking at software and so forth like that. And sometimes the non-geeks, though, there are definitely very data-driven people. I'm not saying that administrators aren't data driven, but they're more likely to trust an idea, rely on intuition and stuff. And for them, the details is just obscuring that big picture. And like I can identify with that, because the intuition for me, it's like a lot of times it's like, does this does this just feel right? Like, this feels like this might be the right software. What can I point to? Not necessarily until I start talking to the tech people to say, here's what I'm seeing. You start helping me fill in the blanks and getting down there. And those are productive conversations to have. So some of those, though, when you're seeing the divider, if you're in a meeting, where the IT people are going like, okay, you're talking about something, your head's in the clouds, like show us what that, show us some proof about this or some detail around that, where, others can say, hey, this just feels like the right way to go. I can't tell you why I'm thinking that and stuff, because they just don't see it from that kind of a detail level. And then we talked a little bit about the language already too, but just to go in a little more detail, typically technical people are much more precise. If you're programmers, it's like code, you're precise, your language isn't as ambiguous and stuff, where non-geeks really, they have facts and ideas, but a lot of times it's around the feelings about those facts and ideas. And this is one thing that I struggled with, and I still struggle with a lot, is when I throw out an idea and I'm talking to really on a technical level, is I'm really looking for feedback from that idea that I threw out. I'm looking for somebody to respond and say yes or no, because, and how that can kind of manifest is, and this is so real, this has happened to me so many times with like working with technical staff, is talking about commitment dates on projects. And it was one of the things I learned when I was like right at the beginning of my CIO career and working with a lot of the programming staff. I would say, here we're being asked to do this project. Give me an idea of the timeline, or how much what's the timeline for this project? I don't know how long it takes you to write code to make this happen. And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I don't know is an answer, and it's not helping me. And it got really frustrating. They'd be like, well, give me a date that you want to have this by, and then maybe I can tell you if we think we can commit to working towards that date and stuff. And it was just this constant back and forth until I realized that I was asking for a date and they were asking for a date, and I needed to sit down and actually just say, okay, here's the date. Can we do it by this date? And then I'd get the feedback to say, no, that's not going to be possible, because then we have to do this, 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 and this. But they were really hesitant to throw out a date first, because their experience had always been was, I give them a date, they're going to hold me to that. I don't know that I can promise that, because who knows what's going to happen with IT. It's the first conversation we're having about a project. And of course, the vendor says it's really easy to install, but we all know that that's not true, like 99% of the time. So, those are just some things to kind of think about. If you're even, working with your team, is just because they're asking for a date, maybe you need to do a little bit more negotiation to say, what's your time frame you're thinking of? Or if everything, is laid out and goes as planned, we can commit to working to this by the fall semester and stuff. But it's, we understand that it's really hard to not always be able to get a drop dead date for somebody. There obviously are things that, have to happen by a certain date, but things we don't know about when we start projects always come into play. So I always think this is a great graphic, and those of you in project management probably have seen this a lot, is communication sometimes can happen like this. And this is what we are trying to avoid. We have those conversations and we think, the customer explained it, and so we built it. And it really comes back to, asking questions, coming back and saying, here we go. It's the whole waterfall versus agile kind of mindset of, iterative process. We come back, ask some questions. Are we on the right path? Is this what we're looking for? Because the last thing you want to do is end up, building a 3-tier swing when the customer really needed a tire swing. And I think somebody just said that earlier, like sometimes they don't know what they're wanting to do. As Mike said, your end users don't have the language to be explaining it in the way that sometimes the IT people need to hear it. So sometimes our challenge of where we go wrong is that we're trying to use our language, our technical language, to convince people who are non-technical to see it the way we see it and why. And this is really where the strategies come in, is how do we do that? Do we get convinced if an administrator, keeps having this conversation, but this is going to be great because it's going to do this and it's going to be wonderful and it's this, and we are having the conversation to saying, but there's no way that's going to work because the technology is not, people aren't using it this way, or that data isn't in the system that you think. And we can get too deep in the weeds, technical, for what they're talking about of what's the end goal and how do we bridge, how do we bridge that? So I'm going to throw out another question to you, and for those of you who haven't talked, if you want to pop some things in the chat or just raise your hand, what are some strategies you can think of that you could use to help bridging those gaps? We talked about a few, but I'm reading the chat here. Switch my screen so I can see some hands up. What are some strategies that you think you could employ to start bridging the gap when you're communicating with non-geek people?
I'll go. Just get in the room. We have ALC, Academic Leadership Council, and one of the things I was going to speak to the provost, we used to get invites to come to the meetings, and you can learn a heck of a lot just by sitting and not speaking. And, you can, after that meeting, after you take your notes, what have you, you can follow up and say, hey, I heard this, by the way, did you know that? That's great. We'd like to line this up because that will dovetail nicely with this initiative, and basically get in the room with people, whether it be this virtual setting or physically in the room, and have a conversation. It's important.
Absolutely. Tyler and then Fian.
So I think that, I'm definitely in the geek, somewhere in between, but kind of geek adjacent, I would say. I can definitely talk without being super technical. I think one of the challenges that I anticipate is dealing with people's feelings. And you'd brought up the idea that, the technical folks are usually very metric oriented and the non-technical, go more by gut. And I have a hard time, I'm obviously not going to change my personality to be more of the type of person that goes by gut feeling. But I think that one way maybe we can bridge the gap is defining things so people understand them, especially if you're having a first meeting. So I'm just thinking if we're going to gauge success of a project, let's define what success means. We have to find the metrics that we're going to be able to look at and say that this was successful. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago where someone said, "Oh, I don't know if it's going to work." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, it doesn't feel slick." And I said, "Okay, that's easy to get really frustrated about." But I kind of took it and said, "Okay, well, let's define what you mean by slick."
Absolutely.
What is that easy to use? Is this some other visual thing? And have those metrics down, agree on definitions. Because, we had a good example of a project that sometimes everybody can't be happy. So we have to decide who are the more important people to make happy. An example is this new software we were implementing. It could either be one way that faculty really liked, or it could be this other way that, these incoming students really liked. And the argument from the provost was well, we care about our students. They're our customers. So unfortunately, as much as some of these faculty members were saying, well, this is a little bit more difficult, it's either going to be more difficult on the student or more difficult on the faculty member. So also defining whose feelings matter. I mean, all our feelings matter, but what is the metric we're going after? And it might be one geared towards one audience versus another. But I mean, that has a whole other set of challenges.
And bring it back to your mission, vision, and values of the campus as well. Yeah, absolutely. Asking questions and clarification. It was a great approach, Tyler. Fian.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. Tyler, you kind of took most of my words right out of my mouth. So, thanks. I mean, Garrett, your points got me started too. No, don't apologize, Tyler. The big point I guess I was wanting to make was what Tyler said very well, which was using your skills maybe as a geek, those quantitative, metric-driven tendencies to want to define things clearly and so on, to come into a conversation and frame it with clear definitions and with clear understandings in order to establish aligned expectations, which should be one of the the goals of any conversation, really. But you can implicitly use those skills that you have as a geek to operate in the room with non-geeks and bridge the gap. And the context is great. I mean, Garrett's point, just like we would want others in the room as non-geeks to attempt to hear us and gain some context from our perspective, it's only fair that we seek to do the same, right? And from many years ago, my experience on the campus is I appreciated being invited to to faculty and staff meetings that were, in essence, usually not technical, but that gave you a really good perspective on what it was your technical solution might bring to the table.
Absolutely. Joseph.
Hi, thank you. One thing I've always used throughout my career that's really sort of helped is using analogies for people. If you can get creative enough to really exemplify your message or what you're trying to do with like an analogy that sort of bridges that gap, I've always found it to be helpful. And it sort of is a great technique just to relate to somebody on like a personal level. I find it if both sides feel heard and they both are able to communicate in a similar way, oftentimes you can really build that bridge naturally through conversation. So I definitely find getting in front of the person can usually help with that as well. Email and phone can be okay, but yeah, if you can really sit down with somebody and just connect at that human level and bridge that gap with a common language, I think that's always been a big helper in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion to use. All of that is, I think, the conversation. I mean, it's and not just, this kind of goes back. I'm not sure if you've talked about Crucial Conversations yet, but best book ever. Like, honestly, if there was one book I would recommend you as a CIO get, is Crucial Conversations. I've read that book numerous times, had it on a DVD. Every time I would have to go in and talk with the vice president of academics at Jamestown, I would listen to that before I would go in, because she was very, very smart, very quick, not technical, but she picked stuff up really fast, and she could overwhelm me in conversations and stuff. So I always I would get back and it'd be like, focus on the goal. Focus on the goal, bring things back to what's the goal we're trying to do, because she had a path and I had a path and they were not the same way. And then we were like, how do we get to the same goal? I always recommend that book. Garrett, go ahead.
It's interesting. So 11 years ago, I came into higher ed. So I came from corporate America, and, I worked in healthcare, finance, and other, industries. And you got to learn the lingo. We provide a highly valued service that glues the world together. And you have to learn their lingo. You can't say, well, I just do IT and this is now you're creating a silo yourself, right, around yourself, and then say, you are exactly who we thought you were. You don't want that. You got to, if you're speaking in finance, you got to use those terms to say, hey, but this is how it connects to what we're trying to do. And they will then have an interest in understanding you and how you're helping to solve the business solution or challenge. So I've learned that. So higher ed, I'm going to admit, it was, went to college like everyone else here, and it was a tough lingo to learn. And when I went through the academy, I will say this, it helped me learn the lingo a lot better. And that's just my advice. So
Very, very well said. So I'm going to just kind of recap a lot of probably what's all been said here too. You know, some of those ways of addressing those things are to talk about what to do and not worrying about how to do it right away. Just exactly what has been said previously too. Again, using stories, anecdotes, analogies, things like that. These are all ways, and you've got it. You brought these up already. Again, and really focusing again on the goals and the objectives. It's really, like Garrett said, you know, you've got to be able to learn their lingo if you expect them to learn your lingo as well. So what's your role in this whole thing, as we've been talking about all, you know, for the last hour here, is really creating that culture of collaboration, training your team, empowering your team, working as a translator. I mean, you know, it's skills you build. I'm not always good at it. I try. It's every chance you get, you need to practice those skills. I think being an advocate for IT as a strategic asset is another thing that the CIO needs to do. We've all talked about the fact that you're not at a table when you probably should be at the table. And those are really, you know, those are things that as a CIO going forward, you know, your role is really going to depend on that. Those are some of the things to do. I'd like to do. Yeah, I'm just catching up on the text messages and stuff here too. So we've got 2 minutes left. And what I want you to think about is, what can you do, or what do you want to commit to going forward to help improve your communication between geeks and non-geeks? So think about it. What one relationship can you build in your organization, or what's the jargon or term that you can eliminate? And sometimes just bringing this up with your team and saying, you know, like, hey, you know, we're going to do a code word. When you start using jargon, you know, somebody say, hey, stop, put that in English or whatever. You know, SUNY, for those of you who are in SUNY, they are horrible with acronyms. EIT, this came up at a meeting. Like, what does EIT stand for? It's the accessibility committee for that's part of all of SUNY, but nobody on our campus remembers what the EIT stands for. I'd actually have to go look it up, because I know that it's our accessibility thing, but I don't remember what the acronym stands for. So think about those things, the jargons that you can eliminate. Or what conversation do you need to have? What strategic conversation do you need to have? I don't need anybody to share that necessarily, but I'd like everybody to think about that going forward. And as you leave this, hopefully you found some takeaways here. But you know, think about what you're going to commit to doing to help improve your communication with the non-IT people or non-technical people. I think this is a great way to end. I mean, our goal is to really bridge that confusion and get to clarity during our conversations. So I wish I would have left a little more time for questions, but I'm glad you've been asking them throughout the presentation. But is there any other last things you would like to, any last questions or advice or things you'd like to share?
There are lots of thank yous coming through the chat, Denise. So I'm echoing the gratitude. This is a fantastic conversation, and just some conversation that can continue into the small groups as well. So thank you so much for putting this together and sharing your experiences and what has worked for you over the years. So
Very welcome. Always nice to be with this group. And I do think one last thought I want to leave you with is, you know, food is always a great way to bring people together. And we've been really successful here at Corning, where I had a meeting with the president earlier this morning, and he said, wow, you know, when he first came 6 years ago, he said IT was the grouchiest, you know, ridiculously sheltered department on the campus. Nobody wanted to talk to them. And we're now part of the library. And he said, you are now the most dynamic group and the fun group on campus. And a lot of it had to do with, we started inviting people over for lunch and
Wow.
bringing people over for food. And they got to know people. And we weren't so much the, you people, we can't talk to you. We talked to them without being in high stake meetings. We started making some more casual conversations. Yes, alcohol always does a great job too. So that might help. So thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of your program.
Yeah, we're gonna pause the recording and give everyone a chance to. We're gonna start our recording again. Welcome back to the second half of our growth session. And we are welcoming to the Zoom stage here two of our amazing friends and CIO former mentors. I've already set the stage for you all in our opening, and they're excited to get ready for their applied learning project. They're not excited, they're trying to get excited about presenting their applied learning project in 7 days. So we'll be together in Syracuse on May 8th at the SUNY Oswego Metro Center, and we've got a group of 12 eager leaders who are working on a project to showcase the skills they've learned, and now they're putting it all together. And so thank you for putting together this mini workshop to get them geared up and prepared. So thank you to both of you for your time today, and the show is yours.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting us. I'll just start out by saying it's always great working with Jackie. And I like having this annual event where we can get together and prepare a couple times and catch up on our lives. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's good. So actually, I'll go to the first slide, and Jackie, that one's going to be yours.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, well, good afternoon, everyone. I really hope you're having a great session and going through all the great ways to be a good leader. And obviously, we're here to talk a little bit about how to help you do your presentation and just some things to think about, right? When you're putting your presentation together and what will it be like when you actually are doing your actual presentation. At the very top here, it says preparation. Can't stress that enough. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Give yourself enough time. The other thing to think about, really start with the end in mind. What are you trying to convey to your audience, right? What do you want folks to walk away with? And so it's really important to be, think about the end in mind first before you begin to start thinking about your presentation. There's a really great quote here. If a story is not about the hearer, he will not listen. And here I make a rule. A great and interesting story is about everyone, or it will not last. And that is so true, right? So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your presentation, the content, how you're pulling things together. And as we go through this slide deck, we'll give you lots more tips and tricks that hopefully will be helpful as you go through your thought process. Sean?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, you probably want to be thinking about what is the content and what's the purpose really of what you're going to be talking about. Is it a report? Are you explaining something? Are you telling a story? Although I would encourage you to always think of it as a story, whatever you're going to, leave people with. And if I was to suggest, after being a mentor for several years, probably 4 or 5 years I've done it, my biggest advice I would give to anyone is that less is more. Going and thinking and focusing on what you want people to take away from your talk. And whatever those 2 or 3 key points, especially since I know you've got less than 10 minutes and you've got Carol in there, like running the time all the time and flashing the things.
That's right.
So, yeah, like focusing on what you want people to hear and keeping it inside in that time zone. And just start with your beginning, telling people what you want them to hear. giving them the overview of it and having a closing, that reinforces what you wanted them to hear, and going back and allowing time to have Q&A and, have that kind of interaction that you're looking for. Okay.
Yes, and thanks, Carolyn, for your message in the chat. She will have her cards. You will know exactly how much time you have left. So in your preparation, what I really like to do is really go out. There's some great resources. Obviously, there's all sorts of resources. I love TED Talks. I think there are some really great folks on TED Talks who really can help you understand how to really do good presentations. Presentations come with many things, right? It's not just the actual presentation and what you've put together there, but it's actually the way you are, in fact, presenting that content as well as part of your presentation. So think of those, have you been to a conference? Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's a colleague who have really great presentation skills and really delivered a pretty solid presentation. I always go to presentations that you will go back to, what held your interest and your attention, what made it good, what made it funny, what made it interactive. Some are more of a natural than others, right? Some have a little bit more anxiety over presenting. If you have some challenges, Toastmasters is another really great way in which you can practice, right? Go to your local Toastmasters and it will help make significant improvement. I mentioned TED Talks as well. Watch them, pick different ones. What did you like about them? Did something resonate with you or not? What would you not do perhaps? And so those are the things that you'll begin to really understand what are the makings of a really good presentation. The other thing too, I have some amazing colleagues who do presentations. I do this presentation with Sean almost every year, but I also have colleagues. So I present at board meetings. I will present in front of our state legislature. We just did a combined academic and student affairs and IT conference here at Minnesota State for our Workday implementation. And I was up on the stage with my colleague and we were presenting together. And I do lots of presentations at different professional development activities like EDUCAUSE. So working with your colleagues and getting with a colleague who does this really well is also extremely helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. I think like when you do those kinds of presentations, I think what you're really trying to focus on is what you want people to hear and how you want them to hear it. I think sometimes when people start doing their presentations, they kind of focus on all the material they want to get through. And if people hear it, like that's a sideline. But that isn't really what our goal is. Our goal is to go and tell people a story and focus on a few things that they can learn. It's really hard to leave a presentation and certainly remember everything that the person talked about. But the more I think you make it interesting and talk to them, about a few key points so that they can understand, then you will be able to go in to have them have the takeaways that you really want them to leave with and have them something to chat about afterwards. So I think also when you're looking at your story, you'll want to think about how you want to visualize and what kind of materials you want to use. Certainly the text that you include is important, but less text, I think it can lead to people listening more than necessarily just going and reading the text and taking it away from the presentation. The pictures that you use can also say a lot about what you're trying to do. And then here we have a picture of kids listening to their teacher read them a book. Now, we just said don't read, so I'm not sure this is the best picture, but she has the crowd exactly the way that she wants them to go, attentively listening to her story. So thinking how, you bring the materials in, the picture in, the graphics in that you can use to go and to reinforce what you're trying to say can really help. And there's lots of good sources. You want to think about going and using Creative Commons. You'll want to cite your sources when you're doing pictures, and certainly having alt text in the background, thinking of the digital accessibility component. I have a little bit more on that later.
So we're going to talk a little bit about modality, right? All of us, obviously, we're here on Zoom. So that's a way in which we can do presentations, right? In person also too, with your presentation up on the screen behind you or next to you. And then a combination of hybrid or high flex, right? So be mindful if you're using Zoom, whether it's Zoom or Teams and using them sort of interchangeably, think about the setting in which you are going to project out. So frequently what I do, I think about the time of day, especially if I'm in my house versus if I'm in the office. What does the sun look like? Do I need more light that's going to be in front of me? Think about what your environment is going to look like for the person who's consuming your presentation, right? Always test the quality of your microphone and camera. Do that ahead of time, right? You can schedule yourself your own session and just make sure folks can hear you, right? Making sure your camera works. What angle is your camera at? If you are using a ring light, just making sure you understand where it's best placed. What type of other lighting might you need? So just make sure you're checking out your technology. And I would suggest you not do that just the day of. Make sure you're doing that beforehand. I think we've all been in places and spaces where our technology has failed us and we said, oh, but I checked that a couple of days ago. So just making sure you're checking and rechecking, your environment. Also making sure if you are doing something at home, try as best as you can to find a quiet place. Be mindful of when others are in your space with you and how that impacts your presentation. How do you keep people from zooming out? We all know it's so easy to multitask. Right? When you're on Zoom and you're saying, I'll just do this email really quickly. Your goal is to be so interactive and so engaging that folks don't want to zoom out, that folks don't want to do other things while you're doing your presentation. Another thing to do also as well is help your audience understand how you want them to interact with you, right? If you want them to use the chat, do you have somebody manning the chat on your behalf that can help you interact in that way? And we have here, having a wing person is really helpful if you can. But just letting people know, are you comfortable with being stopped mid-presentation? Be careful with that one because sometimes that can derail you a bit if you're allowing people to interject before you're done. So just think about how you want your audience to interact with you, especially during your presentation and perhaps during your Q&A time. Make sure people can hear you well. One thing I will say, and I don't know how many of us have heard when you're in a room and there's mics going around and someone says, oh no, I have a teacher's voice. No worries, I'm loud enough. That's actually not the best thing to do or to say, use the mic, right? For those folks who have hearing challenges or other impairments, they really need to utilize that mic. I will also say too, if you're in the room and you don't use the mic and folks are on Zoom, depending on the setup of your room, sometimes it's a little challenging for folks who are on Zoom. So if you're in a hybrid situation, sometimes it's hard to hear. Use your mic. It'll be really important as you move through your presentation. So making sure you're checking your technology, making sure people can hear you, making sure you're clear on what your environment looks like to those who are, sitting and listening to your presentation, also really important pieces.
Yeah, thanks for talking about the mic. That comes up all the time.
All of the time, oh, I can't hear you. Also, too, one thing really quickly, Sean, before we move to the next slide, something else, and I have had this experience for whatever reason. I might have had my work laptop at home and I might have worked from home that day. The next day I come into the office and now my mic doesn't work. Right. And so you just have to make sure you're checking and rechecking, because even as you're moving to different places and spaces, check that too. The other thing I would say is if you are not hardwired to your network, make sure you have really good connectivity. I always bring a MiFi with me just to make sure if something happens with wireless and I can't connect, I can still connect if I need to be able to do that. I also have a little mini pouch that I have with different types of cords. You'll be surprised when you go somewhere and you're saying, I don't have the right cord to connect to whatever system I'm trying to connect to. So always make sure you have the right kind of cords. Make sure you have your own power, your backup power, just making sure you have the things that you can pivot quickly should you need to.
And that brings, okay, it's On the right slide, yeah, okay. So it's really, everyone's gonna be nervous. I mean, I was a little nervous, as we got on here at 2 o'clock and, talking, and this is a talk that we've given in the past. But a little bit of nerves is good, it means that you care and you care about your audience. But I can understand some people can become almost paralyzed by the thoughts of going and speaking in front of like a large number of people. No one in this crowd should have that kind of feeling, I would say, with respect to, all of your, the other attendees. And I'm sure you have like this camaraderie and trust among one another, but I can't understand that. So I really think it is a good idea to visualize what you're going to say, see yourself going and doing the talk. If you've been in the venue before, I think it's good to, put yourself in that place and to see yourself doing it. It's certainly something that I've done in the past, and I've done a lot actually when I was an athlete. I would spend time visualizing, what I would do and how I would try to perform. And I don't see it being any different for something like this. So the other component is Jacqueline really just talked a few minutes about how important it is to go and be prepared and be ready, because things go wrong. Almost no matter what, you never know what's going to happen, and technology does fail. I'll just tell you a funny story. Well, it was funny to me anyway. Was the first time we did this talk, I went off to go, and actually I was being the master of ceremonies at a CIO conference. And I had all my materials with me, like on my iPad. I was going to run the whole thing from my iPad. And I left my iPad on the plane, which left me in a rather difficult situation. But I had just done the presentation and knew I should bring all of my materials on paper too and have a second copy, because you can never know. I was just expecting that, the power might go out, my iPad might be dead. But no, I didn't even have my iPad. So you just got to be ready for those kinds of those things that can go wrong. But the other thing is, when things go wrong, it's not the end of the world. Like, just roll with the punches, go take care of it. Particularly in this kind of situation, you've got Carolyn and Christy will go and they manage the room, and they'll be there to help you. And it's just all part of going and part of the experience and part of the journey. And you'll solve any problem that goes up. And it's just a chance to make it memorable. So I'll tell you this other story. It was this time we were doing our first I used to teach, work at the University of Windsor in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And we had this symposium every year. And it was the very first year. And we had brought in this professor from Michigan State University who had written, the learning management system that we were just going to go and move to. And the morning that we arrived at around 8 o'clock, the power went out in the city on this beautiful sunny day. And this professor, we had maybe 200 people there at the event. And the professor said, you know what, let's just go take everyone out on the grass and I can speak to them from there. I have my talk already in mind. We're just going to go with it. I'm going to be able to go and do it. And he was ready to go, whatever happened. And I think that's the kind of attitude that you need. The power did mercifully come back on, about 10 minutes before he was going to talk. So he stayed inside and he did an awesome job because he was a good speaker and he was comfortable with doing whatever it took. So whatever happens, you just roll with it and you'll be able to go and, make the people leave with what you wanted them to leave with to begin with.
All right, so we're going to take all of that great advice. We're going to put together a really amazing presentation. And then we're going to practice, 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 right? I'm going to say it again. We're going to practice, practice, practice. Sean just mentioned having a paper copy of your presentation, and some might say, oh, I've got it in Google Docs, I've got it in my email, I've got it over here. Sure, do all of those things, but always make sure you have a paper copy. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to take out that paper copy and just keep myself moving forward. Also, too, sometimes while technology is being worked on while you're doing your presentation and you have limited time, that gives you an opportunity to still continue through your presentation while some of that those technology challenges might be happening behind you. So, again, I can't stress enough what I do actually. Obviously, I run through the presentation. Make sure you have your speaker notes, which is that little note section underneath your slides, because you can print that out alongside your paper copy. And then sometimes what I do, especially if I'm at home, I will actually walk around with that paper copy and act like I'm doing a presentation to people. Right. And you can, whether you're comfortable doing it in the mirror, whether you want to do that with your significant other or a child or a friend or whomever, it is important to practice. You have a 10-minute time limit, right? You need to make sure, time yourself, right? And know how much time you need to spend on a slide. Know if you say, wow, I've actually had too many slides, or might have too much content on the slide. You've got to be able to practice so you can hit your target. Part of the rigor of programs like this is to make sure you're able to follow within the confines of what they give you. Because if you go out and you speak and say at a conference and someone says, wow, you have 25 minutes to do this presentation, you're going to have to stick to 25 minutes. So it's a good idea to practice your presentation, timing it to make sure you know where you might have to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I'll just add too, sometimes when you practice, it's one thing and you do it in like 7 minutes. But then you get out and have a crowd, all of a sudden it just goes like that the time. And
so
you go, oh, all of a sudden Carolyn's got her card up and there's
Yeah,
only a minute to go.
that's right. And you're like, holy cow.
And so, yeah, so it is good to practice with others, I think, too. And I know actually I've spoken at EDUCAUSE and we brought a whole bunch of our staff in and did the presentation beforehand, just so we could go and run through it. So it is good to practice with, other people that you work with or some of your other teammates that you're working with your mentees as well.
And Christy has a really great point. You can record yourself. You can set up your own session, record yourself, and there's your timer. Placards there. Don't let them make you nervous, right? So you should know where you are in your presentation. If you might be taking a little too long on a slide, you've got to know how to quickly move through, but you will have those pop up for you. And like I said, know how to manage through that as well as you see those pieces come up, so you know exactly how much time you have left. And, I think one of the most important things is understanding how you manage your nerves. Like what seats you in a little bit more of a comfortable environment. Again, never let them see you sweat, right? Take a moment to enjoy the place and space that you're in with your presentation, and remember to breathe. I can't tell you what that really can help you do to kind of really center yourself. Have fun. Be you. If you're a person who, you can incorporate humor where you can, please do that. Just be yourself, be dynamic, be energetic when you're giving your presentation. This is your content, right? And so you want to exude passion about the content and what you're delivering out. And that way you'll connect a little bit more easier with your audience when you're passionate about what that looks like. Sometimes it means, like, if you're nervous, then find an area on the wall or find someone that you might be comfortable with and focus on that. So that tends to take down your nerves as well.
Yeah, nobody knows the content better than you, so you don't have to worry about that kind of any imposter syndrome or anything. You've got your content, you know what it is, just go ahead with it. Whoops.
Oh.
Go ahead. You have this one too, Jackie.
Okay. So I always like when I'm doing a presentation to have it feel like it's a conversation with someone, right? Make sure you're reading the room, making sure you're listening to others, looking at others. Are you losing people? Do people look distracted? Are they on their laptops? Are they on their phones? And if they are, figure out how you can pivot. So making sure you're thinking about those things. I've mentioned making sure you're letting folks understand and know how you want to interact with people, right? Again, is it questions during, questions after? Are they using the chat? Know your audience. So I know my board that if I don't get through my presentation and they're interjecting their questions, the likelihood of me not finishing my presentation is high with that particular audience, with my board of trustees. So as much as you can get to know who your audience is and be able to adjust through that, that's important. But just making sure you give folks the directive on how you want them to interact with you. As Sean had mentioned, right, this is your story, right? This is the topic you chose. It can be whatever it is you want it to be. You don't have to be the subject matter expert in all things in all parts, right? I always think about how, as Vice Chancellor of IT for this system, I don't know everything about what's happening in my division around all things IT. I don't have to be the subject matter expert in everything, but what I've picked, the pieces that I am presenting on, that's where I like to show my expertise. So again, this is your story. You present it how you want it. You own it. If it brings out knowledge and interest from others, wow, that's exactly what you want, right? You're doing the most wonderful job. That is your absolute goal. You want people to be able to interact with you and ask questions and get just as excited as you are about the topic as well. One of the things that I find can get away from you is how quickly you are talking. Sometimes nervousness, the way in which people exude that is through talking very, very quickly. Best thing to do is after each of your line, if you find that you're speaking quickly, after each bullet, just take a quick breath. So you see how that makes a difference? And so that helps kind of, settle yourself down a bit. It also helps to slow you down. Take your time, right? That's why when Sean mentions, don't have a lot of content on your slides. Folks are going to get lost in it. And it's why less is more, right? So you really want to make sure you're taking your time, but being aware of what your time is. The other thing too, sometimes audiences don't want to ask questions. They get nervous. My own staff does that. If I'm doing a presentation and I ask them questions, I'll hear crickets because they just, they might be afraid. They don't want to ask the wrong question, or they don't want to ask a question. Maybe they're not in the mood to ask a question. So find some folks within your own audience that you can seed some questions. Because sometimes the first person who asks the question, then it stems other people to say, okay, it's okay for me to ask the question. So you might, if you're able to, just seat some questions in the event that the audience is a bit quieter than you'd like.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I really like the picture that we have for this slide, which really, I feel like it shows someone having a conversation with the people in the room. It's not necessarily about the slides or whatever. He's talking to the people. You can see that they're listening, and there's even somebody, I think, in the front row is talking. So, and this is your goal, to have that kind of conversation with people, so that you know that they're listening, but they're hearing what you want them to hear, and they're interested in your topic. So the other thing that I like to think about, and we focus, is the accessibility and the digital accessibility of slides in terms of really making them accessible. And particularly as we move into Title II over the next year, this will be even more present and awareness that people will have. But really, a few simple items can really go a long way in terms of the digital accessibility. I think of the accessibility to like the microphone issue as being a really important one, so that people hear. But making your slides accessible means really having them in plain language so that there's no acronyms and people can understand what you're trying to say. Ensuring that you have text equivalents inside the images that you're using. That the color contrast is correct, so that people who are colorblind don't necessarily have to worry about not being able to see the content on the slide. contextual hyperlinks. So use short phrases when you have hyperlinks. Don't use the actual hyperlinks themselves. And then really structuring your content so it's on there. So if someone takes your slides afterwards and they were to go into tab through them and have a reader use them, they'll be able to go and read them in the order that they're intended. So, and just really knowing some of those small key concepts and being able to use them is what makes your slides accessible. And then you go back to the 7x7 rule, really no more than 7 words on any line, no more than 7 lines per visual. If you need more words, you can make subpoints. Just one main point with a maximum of 6 subpoints on a slide. So really is go and simplify. And this is back to, again, less is more. You don't have to have it as your speech shouldn't be on the slides, just a few key concepts so that people know what you're going to be talking about, and using the slides to emphasize your point, not to make your point. The other side thing is the font size. The font size should always be 24 points or higher as you go. And slides, and I know Carolyn and Christy will share the slides. We have a little bookmark that we use here at Oswego and give to people that really has the key concepts that we try to leave people with.
So what are the tips and tricks that we have, right? So tools, there are a number of tools that you can utilize to make your presentation, right? Obviously there's PowerPoint, there's Canva, there are just a lot of other tools out there as well. What I will say about the use of AI, I'm a proponent for AI. I think it offers great learning. Be responsible with it, making sure the work is your own work as you move through. Always have responsible use of these types of tools. Don't present work that is not your own. I will say, one, there's no learning in that, and you're utilizing AI to prompt thought and creativity, not to do the work for you, because that's why you're going through this type of program, right? Can ChatGPT help you create a PowerPoint? Yes, it can. Obviously, we know it can. But just making sure that the work is your own, that whatever prompts that you use, if you used a prompt, make sure you're noting them in your references and how you went through that. But I would encourage you to do that for ideation. Think about how you can do your best presentation. If you're struggling with how to reword something, to really try and get it down into some of that framework that Sean talked about. Great use of AI, right? And being able to kind of figure out what that can look like. But again, I can't stress enough, this needs to be your own work. That's where the teaching and the learning happens as well. So pick what tools are comfortable for you. I just did a PowerPoint presentation. I'm in law school and I had to do a PowerPoint presentation on employment discrimination. And I really was having a hard time finding a template in PowerPoint, but I found a really great one in Canva. There are some free resources in there. You can put together a template, you can download it into a PowerPoint. And there's some great options, and there's a lot of AI that happens within that environment as well, that you can say, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the type of presentation I'm trying to put together, and it will come up with different things. You can make logos, you can do all kinds of things with a tool like Canva. So again, explore all of your tools. Don't get too mired in details of graphics and colors. One other thing I will mention too, as far as making sure works, if you embed, let's say, a video, make sure your video works, and make sure you have that downloaded to where you're doing the presentation from. Frequently, sometimes it just gets a little tricky and those things don't pop up. So make sure in your practice that you understand and know that you've got that specifically on your device, so it can come up much more easily. Again, AI, use it responsibly. Make sure you're doing your own work. Use it, get creative and thinking about your idea, and have it help you create the best presentation you can possibly create.
Yeah, I find I like to use AI and ChatGPT in particular. With my presentation and say, here are my 3 key points that I'm trying to provide to the audience. Take a look at my slides and how do you think I've done in terms of going and providing those thoughts. And you'll get some suggestions back and feedback, and some of it's good feedback, some of it's not good feedback, and you don't necessarily need to take it because they don't have, it's not the same context that you have. Another way that I like to use it is what kind of questions do you think I might hear from the audience? What do you think they might still be wondering about? And is there ways to go and strengthen it to reinforce the 3 ideas that I'm trying to leave? And you get some good feedback because you're always starting from your own point of view, and it's good to see what others have.
So it's not just about we're going to get prepared for the presentation, right? So we're prepping, we're practicing, we're using our tools, we put together our presentation, we've given our presentation now, right? So what do we do next? It's not like, whew, because there's going to be a sigh of relief for some of these things, right? You can say, oh, it's done. I can go sit down. But it's a really great opportunity for some self-reflection, right? Evaluate how you think you did. Not to be overly critical, especially if it's a presentation that you're going to maybe repeat somewhere else in some other way. It's really good to evaluate, where do you feel like, wow, I had a gap there. I wonder why, and how can I be working on that? So don't spend a ton of time on it, but make sure you self-evaluate to know where you could have made some improvement and work on making those improvements. One other really important question that, again, it's a goal, right? Did people actually hear what you were trying to deliver? Did they understand the story that you were trying to give them? Make sure you're also, think about your process. Like I said, you're going to put your presentation together, you're going to plan, you're going to prep. Did you do enough prep? Did you do enough practice? Did you get overwhelmed? And what things might you change, or new tools you might utilize to help you prep in the future as well? How was your delivery? Do you feel like you connected with your audience? Do you feel like you lost them? Did you have them in the beginning and then you lost them at the end? What does that look like? And how did your visuals work, right? Were you able to get through each of the slides? Were you able to pull up that YouTube video that you embedded on your slide deck? Did your visuals come in and out? One thing I will say, be mindful of overutilizing tips and techniques that have, bullets are coming in and, other stuff is moving up and down. Just be mindful that can potentially be a distraction. So I wouldn't overly use those types of techniques. I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, but I would just say in totality, don't use those on every single slide, because for some that might be a little distracting. And again, so as you think about your presentation, did it go the way you had visualized? Was there anything that caught you off guard? Was there an audience member that caught you off guard? And were there any things that potentially were factors that you hadn't expected? As Sean mentioned, one of the really great ways to use ChatGPT is to say, what questions might I get, right? What might be the reactions to this presentation? It helps you get prepared for some of those things that you might not have ever expected. And then there might still be things that you didn't expect when you're giving your presentation. Have poise, give yourself some grace. Folks know that we are working in these environments and sometimes they get tricky. So make sure not only do you have grace for yourself, but have grace for your colleagues as they're working through their presentations as well.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I'll just go back to the AI point. I mean, with AI, the better the prompt, the better the results. So
Exactly.
telling AI who your audience is really helps it to go back and to think what the questions are. So
Right, great point,
this is
Sean.
really good. We had a couple things. First of all, Hassan mentioned that PowerPoint has a timer built in when you start your slideshow. So that can really help you to go and get a good time on your estimate when you're there. And Michael, you pointed out, I call it digital accessibility because that's what we call it at our campus, but digital accessibility, EIT, electronic information technology, is really, a more encompassing word for it. And that's what we really use in SUNY.
Yep.
And we've
Yep.
left time for questions, Carolyn, and you didn't even flash us a card.
Wow, I have quite the reputation. I'm very kind with it, but I think it's helpful to know there's 1 minute left.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. you are. It's actually helpful to people. It's not meant to be punitive. Michael has a question.
Good. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. By the way, Jacqueline and Sean, thank you so much for that. It was very informative. I have done my share of public speaking, and I've never had the luxury of teleprompters. I've had, big audiences, 400 people, but always a big screen behind me. And one thing I've learned, and I was going to ask Carolyn how this is going to work for us, is I've always had platforms where I can lay out the printed slides like you both suggested. That way, I'm a walker and a talker. So body posture, I like to make the audience for myself feel I'm talking to them. So in a room of 400 or 500 people, like the World Linux Expo, I kind of want to walk around. So I'm talking, but when I'm not looking at my screen, I want to have that paper in front of me laid out so I can see that slide on that paper. I'm just looking quickly down at the picture or the text, and I can do that on the left side and the right side. And the microphone was really a good point, because I know, Sean, we've spoken plenty of times. I have a very loud voice, so I tend to, think, well, I don't need a microphone, and I have spoken to audiences of 300-400 without it. But when you start thinking accessibility, right? People who have hearing impaired, that's something new in this, that we're facing. That's become very popular and very well known now. And for our presentations, microphone, is it going to be there? Do we need it? Just how is that setup going to be? Walking around, are we going to be locked down to a podium or one spot?
No, you'll have plenty of room. I'm a walker and a talker as well. So you've got space in the room. It's probably I'm trying to think of dimensions.
You know what,
It's not
I'll
overly large. Oh, you know
Yeah.
the dimensions.
I'll try. So you're going to be on the campus of SUNY Oswego in Syracuse. I'll send, right, Carolyn, the usual room.
The
I'll
Metro Center
send you the picture, or like what we have on that room, so that people can go and visualize what
Yeah.
it'll be like inside there. I'm looking it up right now, but I'll send it to you right as soon as we're done, after I find it. And
Yeah, it'll be
then
great.
people can go and know what it's going to look like before.
Is there a clicker for the PowerPoint, or do we have to hit a mouse pad or a key?
Clicker.
I see
Okay.
Christy's hand up, and she's really the one in charge of all the technology setup. So I'm gonna let her answer this. She's rearing to go here.
Thanks, Carolyn. So I just wanted to mention a few things. So one, we probably are going to end up in a hybrid scenario. We try not to, but we usually do. So then that does kind of dictate where you're standing, so that the folks that are virtual will still be able to see and hear you. We will have a clicker so that you can advance your slides. And what we do is we request your slides ahead of time, or to bring them on a jump drive, so that we can leverage the computer that is in the room to share your show. And we do that because, again, if we end up in a hybrid, we're going to have a Zoom that it also has to get shared with. So using a single computer so that we can make sure that the people that are virtual can see and hear is important. But what that does mean is that on the actual computer is not your notes. So you will need a mechanism to have your notes separate from any device that we are using to showcase the presentation.
One other quick thing I suggest to you is, Christy mentioned they're going to prep and make sure they have all the technology. One of the things that I tend to travel with, especially if I'm going to be speaking at a conference, is my own clicker. right? Make sure you not only bring that with you, you need to make sure that it's all charged up and ready to go. Sometimes when you're traveling, unless you've got a checked bag, you can't bring on batteries with you, right? So just making sure you're prepared and you're thinking about, what if I need my own? So like I said, when I have my own little pouch, I have varying cords, with different connectors. I have my own power pack. I have my MiFi hotspot with me as well. And you'd be surprised how many times not only you might use those tools, but when somebody else says, wow, I really could use one of these and I don't have one, right? And you're able to be assistive there. So come as prepared as you possibly can. But I will say your team here, with Christy and Carolyn, will have you well prepared. Everything is thought of for you. No worries. They'll make sure everything is all wonderful for you. I went through this academy myself, and so I've done this work before too. And it's really great practice. You'll have a great experience. Enjoy it, right? Enjoy the practice of it. And these are going to be skills that you can take and improve upon for sort of infinity. So just enjoy the experience.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we say goodbye to Jackie and to Sean?
Okay.
No.
Thanks,
right.
Carolyn. Thanks, Christy. Thanks, everyone. Hope
Yes,
you
thanks
enjoy.
for inviting us and good luck. And
Good luck.
I hope you enjoy your time at Oswego in
Thank you.
Syracuse next week. Okay.
All right.
Yes, thank you so
Have a
much.
good one.
Jitters are out.
Yes.
Jitters are out. All right, everyone. So we don't have a formal plan for this 20 minutes, but I do have a couple of questions on the agenda that I plan to pose to you, and we can go around. I think that might be, since we have such a nice size group this year, we have time. So I'll go in the order that I see people, unless there's somebody who wants to raise their hand and say, I have a burning thing. But we can talk about storytelling. Jackie and Sean talked about the power of storytelling, and it's not a matter of, everything is story. So it's thinking about what story is most relevant to share that's gonna really drive home the points that you're trying to make, using your stories wisely. So if you have something that you want to bring up to the group about storytelling, you can do that. If you want to talk about presenting in this new hybrid format where Christy said it's likely that we'll have maybe a busy mentor who's not able to join us in person, so we're connected and we've got to have a mic, and we've got most people in the room, some on screen. We've been all presenting on Zoom for the large part since 2020. So going to present in person can sometimes feel like getting back to the old way of doing things. But we could talk about that. They stress to you to think about what you put on your slides and using images. So if you're looking for some motivation or places to find good images, if you want to talk about that, we can do that. Or just the idea of getting your mindset right before you go on and you get ready to present. So I love this Natalie Kogan video. I've put a link to it in the Brightspace environment. It's one of my favorite to really get you into that right mindset. And for those that are, filled with anxiety about it, which you should not be in this scenario, but it's very helpful. So I encourage you to give that a watch. So with that as our jumping off points for what we can talk about, I'm just going to go around and see what came to your mind today, and you can go back to Denise's topics too, but I'd really love to hear what's on your mind about presenting your project. So Fionn, do you mind going first? I see your name and your video square to the left here. I'm going to go around.
Sure, yeah. I guess the first question that comes to mind is what I just put in the chat. Curious, is there expected to be any Q&A following our actual speaking time?
Good question. Christy, I'm looking at you because we do have a smaller group and we haven't finalized the agenda. But we may have a little wiggle room. Usually what we've done is ask people to use their 10 minutes to include Q&A time. So if you know you want to allow like one question, to plan for ending at like 9 minutes, then you've got the extra minute. But what do you think, Christy?
I think that, see, folks, last year we had 24 people we had to squeeze. So we were like moving. So this year we've got 12. So I think that we can probably have a question or two after the 10-minute mark and be safe and still be able to get you all out in the afternoon.
Yeah. Okay, so 10 minutes formal speaking time. You heard it from Christy. She's our decision maker on this. 10 minutes, and then we will still manage the Q&A time to make sure it doesn't run away because it easily can.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Michael, you were very engaged today, but anything else on your mind here with these topics?
No, I'm good. I'm good. No, it was really good presentations today, and it was very informative. So
Good. Good. Well, make sure we get more Old Westbury up and coming leaders in our academy, right? Well, it sounds like you're having a good experience. I love that.
definitely.
Scott.
Hey, my question is, do we have a order of that we're speaking in or a estimated time of day? Not because I won't be there, just to be able to, take that bio break before I'm up in front of the group or whatever it happens to be, right?
Yeah, I'll make sure that I get the agenda out. What's today? Thursday. So next early next week, definitely by Tuesday, I will share the agenda. But you can plan on it being alphabetical order by last name, so you'll be in the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
Joseph.
Yeah, so today was actually the presentations were great because my particular presentation is more of a story that became a collection of projects, and now it's a centralized project, so to speak. So I was really inspired to hear that the message was to be authentic, be you, tell a story, be engaging. And my project, when I thought about it, wasn't necessarily doesn't fit great into slides, even though I did do that. So I'm excited to actually present some of the actual information, but also tell more of a story and some of the things that don't fit on the slides. So I'm really sort of invigorated now and really ready to present. So it's kind of my comment on the whole day so far.
Awesome. And it'll be an interesting way to consider the speaking part of it, and then also how it's going to live on beyond the May 8th, because we talked about it going on the website and the SUNY digital repository. So, it's going to live without the story too.
Right. Yeah. So there's still little tweaks here and there. So I look to sort of fill in those blanks. But yeah, I'm excited to present, but now I'm going to focus more on getting those little tiny things in the presentation. So.
Phil.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, this was all really good today. I've been kind of mulling over my talk for a little bit. But one of the tips that I thought I'd bring up, in addition to just putting graphics in, is there's a lot of places where sometimes you can just use smart art instead of lists. So if you have lists for things, if you're in PowerPoint, you just turn it to smart art, it just changes up the way that you're presenting it from just being, a column of text to, boxes or shapes or whatever. And then if you add color to that, you can just, you can make the slide a little more engaging visually rather than just have like a list of text.
I like smart art too, and I'm gonna pose it to the group because I'm not an accessibility expert. But how is smart art with the screen readers and, is it pretty accessible, the smart art? I know you can run a check through using PowerPoint and it will tell you, so maybe that's
Yeah,
enough.
you can put alt text with the smart art,
Okay.
so you can just describe the smart art in the alt text.
There's also transitions and animation. So that way it's not all on the screen at the same time.
Yep.
Mhm. Good. All right, let's see. I see Shri. You've been so quiet today. We've got to hear from you.
Yes, I have a little bit of allergy, so I'm a little sniffly today. So I just
Oh.
don't feel like I was just, I was happy to be just a participant today, just listening in. I just have a quick question about the PowerPoint that was for your archives. Like, is there like, can we like have two copies, one for the archives and one we present, so we don't have to have all the things
Yes,
we don't need? Okay,
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
understand. So
just
we could do
make
that
sure
after,
you
that can be
can
done
send
later,
it
right?
in. Yeah, you can send them in,
Got
just be clear, like with me, because they'll go to leadership@suny.edu or to
Got
me directly.
Got
And let me know if it's okay to put on the website. Or if there's gonna be one coming a little later, that's fine.
Sure. It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't have to be. I just wanted to like in my own mind, yeah, yes, I always love good storytelling. It's totally very close to my heart, the idea of, and what works, what doesn't work. I like to always pay attention to that. So I was like, it was nice to be revalidated on that. That's easy. Yeah, and I think it's important not to get too stressed about it either. So I think we got some good do's and don'ts today. So thank you.
Good, good. When I first became a real trainer, I was mentored by someone who was a trainer for 20 plus years. And getting up to train something new, it's always nerve-wracking. And so you never, even after 20 years, she's like, I still get the little butterflies, like the, pee feeling. So she's like, just reminds me I'm alive.
Yeah, I think a little butterflies, some butterflies is a good, but debilitating butterflies is not good. So it's the not managing the monkeys, managing the butterflies. So it's gonna be a whole other article on that.
Thank you. Tyler.
I'm excited to see everyone's presentations. Kind of going to be excited for mine to be over, if I'm being completely honest. But no, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I have a general gist of what I want to get across. I'm just still working through how to do that with my PowerPoint slides, and I tend to like more slides with less content, but building that can be kind of time consuming.
Unfortunately, your last name is a W. So you really have to.
When Caroline said that, I'm like, oh no, okay. Such is my life having a W last name.
But yeah, the first year we did the academy, Christy can attest to this. We didn't have the slide template like we have now. Hopefully all of you have discovered that slide template, and it gives suggested slides in the order to keep people from going overboard with too many slides. That first year, we had people trying to present 40 plus slides in 10 minutes. And so we worked to narrow it down to what we think flows and our most important topics for you all to hit on. So it's not a must, but it's a starting place to just not get a little carried away. Let's see, Alan.
I think Michael had his hand up. If he had a.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to because I know Tyler was just saying what he said, and what Sean and Jacqueline said was it's our story to tell. You know, for I don't know how many years I was a certified trainer, and I walked around, traveled over the country teaching small and large classes. The key, you know, for me, the key thing was it's confidence, but it's comfort level. Nobody knows your topic like you, but more importantly, you don't know everything. You will occasionally get asked questions that you don't have the answers to. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Because you may be talking about a topic and the question is related, but it's not so much related to what your area or experience has been built on. So the minute you don't know the answer, it can kind of hit your confidence level and your comfort level, and then you get that nervous feeling. Q&As are usually generally most complicated, most uncomfortable area of presentation, because now you're giving the power to the audience to ask you whatever they want, and you don't know what they're gonna ask you. I think in our scenario, we're fine. I don't think anybody's here is gonna try and trip somebody up. But in the real world, they may, you know, come up with a question you don't know. And as long as you can exit that situation saying, you know, I really don't know. That's a good question. I've never experienced that. Let me look into that and get back to you. You don't lose that confidence, you know?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I used to have to train New York State policy, and I definitely didn't have all the answers, and it's not something you want to fumble through. So saying, I'm going to look that up and you'll get an answer. You know, I think your word becomes more important in that you follow up. Let's see, who have we not heard from? Ethan?
I think you were on me.
And I skipped over Jen. I'm sorry, Jen.
Hi, everybody. I think for me, Michael's question earlier, really resonated. I did a presentation on campus earlier today. And I'm a very physical person when I generally teach. So pre-pandemic, I'd walk back and forth. I'd stand in front of the podium. I'm originally from Long Island, so I gesture a lot when I talk, and that doesn't always translate very well when you're online, or there's something about being stuck behind a podium that, I don't know, changes the way that I present or I teach. And so I actually left the presentation today with trying to figure out what that means when I do presentations moving forward, because in the hybrid format, that's probably not going to change. I will have lost the ability to walk back and forth in front of the room and gesture and do weird things. So just sort of puzzling through that.
Yeah. You know, do a practice standing up and speaking through it. That was always helpful when I started to train, doing it in front of someone else and a live audience to give the feedback. You discover your filler words, or if you're, you know, moving in a, you know, sort of manner that they want to point out, you know, might be distracting to the audience. It's really helpful to get your own jitters out and, you know, just have another audience before the real audience.
Speaking of, you have you have 4 people from Long Island in this group right now. Look at that. What are the odds? What are the odds? That's crazy.
Technically, I'm from Queens. My job's in Long Island.
Queens is on Long Island, okay?
I think some of us have lived longer on Long Island than some of people who were born on Long Island. So I think years.
I was born in Rhode Island.
I will say this for
It's
those
not even
who-
an island.
those who live north, that is the metropolitan area debate. And as someone who was born in the Bronx, as a mainlander of the United States, you all live on an island. Brooklyn, Queens, all of it. So
I don't know. I'm not even from that area. I think you're all from a foreign country.
there you go.
There's a lot of traffic.
Yes, that traffic we're very good at.
Every time I go to Long Island, people ask, what time are you leaving? And I don't take it as an offensive thing. They're trying to help me prepare for my exit.
Well, the thing is, if you're from New York City or Long Island, you know immediately that person is from that area because whenever you ask for a duration or like how long it takes to get there, we don't measure in miles, we measure in time.
Yeah.
So we're always gonna say, it's about an hour and a half. Well, wait a minute, it's only like 10 miles. Exactly. It's an hour and a half.
So I went to Ethan and then I skipped back to Jen. So let me go back to Ethan and then we'll go to Lewis.
Hey, I mean, I honestly didn't have too much different than anybody else said. I think public speaking is a little normal for me because I literally spend all day, every day, just talking to people. So I think more of it is just getting what you want to talk about organized, and because it's not, just me spitting off the top of my head, it's actually a specific subject. But past that, yeah, I think they did well.
Good. And I know Alan, I didn't mean to skip over you. So I'm getting lots of reminders to go back to you.
No, I understand. I'm forgettable. It's okay.
Alan, do you mind if I jump in front of
go
you?
ahead,
I'm
Lewis.
sorry, but I have to go to my daughter's dance recital practice here in a couple minutes.
30, yeah.
But yeah, so as far as public speaking, I feel pretty comfortable with it. I think Ethan hit the nail on the head with getting your thoughts in order, because I remember when I was younger, I used to like, yeah, I'll go up there. Yeah, sure, whatever. And then you get up there and you're like, oh, you blank out, So once you have the thoughts in order and you kind of have like your order of operations, how you want to discuss it, like in a logical way that makes sense, it's pretty like cut and dry. And so for me, I'm like pretty confident up there just from experience. I've been doing it for 20 years. I've been out in front of soldiers, been out in front of civilians, either way, So I'm pretty comfortable with it. The thing that I always try to think of, like, okay, if I become an expert in this, like somebody could wake me up in the middle of the night and I could talk for 10 minutes about this, So I always try to learn as much as I can about what I have to talk about, and that's kind of how I apply it.
Awesome. Alan, and good luck at the dance rehearsal.
Thank you. It's mostly gonna be me following my son around and make sure he doesn't like go into the stage or something,
I was wondering if you were dancing.
Yeah.
Get ready for your presentation that way.
I'll do it at the capstone. Okay, take care,
You're
everybody.
bringing
It's
the
good seeing
bag
you
with
all.
the shoes. We know.
Yes. Take care, everyone. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
Does anyone else want to jump in?
No, Alan, the stage is yours.
All right.
Please.
So my question, that template you have, do you want things to match, or is it that's just a blank slate?
You can use whatever you are most comfortable with. If there's a campus branding that you're comfortable using, you can do that. We put that together to narrow the scope of the topics that you bring up. So really, we're looking at the titles. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. That just was verifying.
Ellen, you can use the new handy dandy nifty NicerNet template. It's on SharePoint.
I'm sure I'll be able to find it somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Was that your only question, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you go at the end, right? Everyone
Okay.
already asks questions.
All right, and I've updated
Yeah.
your title.
Yes.
Okay. Now I've lost my order. Who?
I do have a question. I think I'm not clear as to, I know it's gonna be a hybrid format. So are you gonna be standing in front of a camera? Are we gonna be sitting on a table? Like, how does it work?
Well, we'll make sure Sean shares that picture of the room, but it is not scary at all. It is a typical meeting space where the front of the room has a projector screen. So you'll be standing in front of the screen, like your back is to the screen. The podium with the computer setup and all the technology is to the left. It's off to the left. It's off center, so you have space to walk. Nothing is in front of you, no podium. And then the audience that's live in the room, they're at small tables. So they'll be in front of you, sitting down, facing forward. And then we'll have on the screen behind you, you won't be able to see them unless you look off to the left where the computer is, the video screens from the virtual audience.
Carolyn, what about the camera? Where is that gonna be positioned?
I'm gonna turn to Christy for that. She's the tech guru.
The best place for it is actually setting right on the podium where the computer is. So the computer in that room is actually underneath glass. So it's like a typical, I don't know, classroom setup, I guess, where they have the computer underneath a glass screen. So it's quite a large podium, and then we just set the camera on the podium.
So if we move to the middle of the classroom, we're off camera.
Possibly, yeah. So we can adjust it, but
Okay.
possibly.
And Hassan, we haven't heard from you. So before we go into the breakouts, we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to air their grievances or questions, whatever you have.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so the one question I have a couple questions, but I can save most of them to the end here. The one question that I wanted to address now was something that Christy brought up, and unfortunately I wasn't able to fully hear her because my boss had messaged me at the same time. Something to the effect of an additional device. So what I know that I heard we want the project on the USB, right? Because there's going to be a centralized computer that we're all going to be plugging into. But what was the other aspect to that? Something for your notes?
Yeah, just whatever you want to do for your notes, whether it's printed out notes, or I know some people will actually use their iPhone or their phone for their notes. So whatever you want to use for your actual notes. I just wanted everybody to know that your notes can't be displayed on the computer itself.
Is are you, even if we use the speaker notes aspect of
Correct.
PowerPoint, we
Correct.
can't do that?
The way the room is set up, we have no control over how it displays out, and the display out is duplicate. And we have tried everything to not have that, but that's how that specific layout is.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
If you have another question, we can help.
Yeah, so the slides that that were listed under the rubric, there were 7 of them that were mentioned as required. Do they have to be in the order that they were mentioned there? No. And also the titles, do they have to match at all to the template? No? Okay.
No. Those are just a suggested starting place, and you have creative license.
Understood. Okay, great. Thank you.
So before we break you into small rooms with your mentor, just want to check in with our mentors and thank you for staying engaged with us all afternoon, first of all, and hopefully you found some value in this. At least now you know what the proteges are worried about, thinking about as they finalize their projects for next week. But anything that you want to add to this conversation? There's been a lot shared already, but if there's something more. Oh, I see Leland's hand. Hi, Leland.
Yeah, is my mic working again? Can you hear me?
Yep.
No.
Okay. So I don't know, I got distracted a couple of times, which I know being in IT is hard to believe. So I don't know if it was talked about at all, but I just wanted to raise the idea of messing up when speaking publicly. Because one of the things I learned early on is that you will mess up, and we all do mess up. But if you don't acknowledge it, a lot of times, like 99 times out of 100, nobody else knows that you messed up. So, if you just keep going, because I mean, I've had times where I get out of order and I just keep going and nobody even realizes, and they think that that's the way I wanted to present or whatever. So, just to, don't just go with the flow and just let it go. And yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't know how we haven't mentioned that before, but it's just a really important point because I feel like every year there's at least one instance where someone will fumble, and then bringing more attention to it is like, I'm like, oh, I wish I had warned them. Don't just go with it. We don't know. And the other point that's a spoiler for the Natalie Kogan video is the audience is rooting for you, especially this audience, but they don't want to look for your errors. They want to see you succeed. So, yes, good point. Anything else from our amazing mentors.
So I probably shouldn't bring like a basket full of rolled up scrunches of paper to throw at them or anything?
Well, the
No?
cabbage and rotten tomatoes, I believe, are being brought and supplied.
Dry,
Okay.
dry
Alright.
erasers. You have dry.
No, I think this afternoon was good. We're here for you
Yeah.
guys if you need anything.
Good.
Plus, we're gonna
Good.
meet with you in a few minutes, but just know that
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of people that are rooting for you at the table, and no
Good.
worries.
So we will give you all an hour in the breakout rooms. Use that time as you wish. The only one other thing I haven't mentioned yet is that after each presentation, we'll have a Survey Monkey that's going to be something for you to complete to give feedback to your peers. So we've set it up electronically so that you can do it right from your phone or your computer and give people an easy ranking, like a 5-star out of 5 stars on each of the major categories. Any comments that you want to make. It doesn't have to be a long feedback, but if there's something that you notice, and know that you're offering feedback in the aspect you're trying to help them develop. They want your honesty. They want it. So this is a benefit to you to really hear how it went and I had a boss who was great, and when I first started, I always wanted to tell him excellent presentation because he's so smart, and it was excellent. But after about the third time that I gave him excellent remarks, he said, please, next time, I really want to know where I can improve. So this audience wants to know where they can improve. So use that feedback form, and we try to make that simple with the links. So with that, it is 3:30, and Christy has prepared our mentor breakout rooms. You can select your mentor and join the group. We'll have it open for an hour. We will come back together at 4:30 for any other questions, set the compass ahead, but yeah, that is our formal program for today.
Carolyn, since Simeon isn't here, I don't see him, right?
No, we're meeting with him on Monday.
Okay. So do you want them just to pick a different mentor that
Yes.
they want to spend some time with this afternoon?
Yeah, so hopefully our mentors are okay with that. You may have a guest. But yeah, this is an awesome program where you can really choose who you get support from, when you need it, how you need it. So take this as an opportunity to get to know another group.
Okay, rooms are open. You just need to select the room that you're headed towards.